Seems like we could use a little bit of music for that. Pope Francis deserves it. The Pope, it's not unexpected, not a shock, but let's put him into context and get some thoughts from people who know a lot more than me. Ken Chandler, the executive editor, NEWSMAX Media, and John Yep, CEO, Catholics for Catholics. John Yep, welcome. And John, please, anything you care to share? This is a big moment for the Catholic Church. And what's going to happen next?
I was there the day he came out onto the loggia for the first time. Can you hear me okay?
Now I can. I'm sorry, you broke up there for a moment. Go ahead, sir.
I was there in Rome the day he was elected Pope, and I remember it so well. And we've been following this pontificate from the very beginning. It's a historic pontificate in many ways. There's been many things, honestly, that have scandalized Catholics around the world at times. We're not denying that, and Pope Francis, first and foremost, in this moment, needs our prayers. And, looking forward to the conclave coming up, we have a very important conclave, which will decide essentially the role of the Holy Father, what he will do in the world at this as a strategic juncture in the world.
Ken Chandler, we have the Pope on the cover of the magazine, NEWSMAX magazine, this month. How about that? After Francis, the next Pope. Very, very timely. Ken, please, anything you'd like to share and anything that I guess you kind of touched on in the magazine profile, please.
Yeah, well, Greg, it's a fascinating, in-depth profile of Pope Francis in this month's NEWSMAX magazine. We talk about the strengths and weaknesses of his 12-year pontificate, his successes and failures, what motivated him, and how Francis's record will influence the choice of the next Pope. Francis was a bridge builder. He reached out to try to help the poor and the underprivileged. But he was a big reformer. But a lot of the changes he made did not go down well with the traditionalists. And it's interesting to see that historically a progressive like Francis has been followed by a more conservative pope. But in this case, Francis has stacked the deck. He's appointed 4/5 of the cardinals eligible to vote for him, for his successor. So in the magazine, we examine if the cardinals will vote for another progressive as pope, or whether the voices for change inside the church will convince them to elect a conservative.
John, if you don't mind, name something he did that you think was really great and something that was not so great.
I think Pope Francis, right off the bat, his initial push towards helping the poor and those who are forgotten by society left an impact on many people around the world, Catholics and non-Catholics alike. That's a good thing, right? He's also, in some ways, he bolstered devotion to Our Lady, right? Even the fact that he wants to be buried at one of the most important basilicas of Rome, St. Mary Major, dedicated to Our Lady. That's good. On the flip side, the constant obfuscation of Catholic doctrine, from matrimony to reception of the Eucharist, and even this false notion that we here at Catholics don't believe that God wills a plurality of all religions, as if they're all equal, right? That's just not a core tenet of being what a Catholic is, right? So he's done some damage, and also the continual protection of sexual predators like Theodore McCarrick, right? So those are things, ultimately his judgment, we leave it to God. We're praying for his soul because at the end of the day, we all need it.
I was very confused by his embrace of transgender dancers on stage. At first, I thought it was a fake video. Let's go ahead. It's C05. And I understand the pilgrimage, Jesus, would talk to all, and the prostitutes, whoever. But they weren't engaged in prostitution when he was eating with them and talking with them. This stuff looks pretty extreme, Ken, and I could never quite figure it out. After I found out it was real, I was even more confused. Ken, what do you make of that? Was that for show? Wasn't that all a little bit too much?
From my perspective, yes, but I think that that's one of the things that really has upset the people, the traditionalists in the church. The way forward, I think, now for the cardinals is to make this big decision. Do they want more of the same, or do they want to take a completely different direction? And do they want a short-term pope, maybe, a placeholder, or are they looking for a long-term successor? Do they want a European or traditional European, or do they want someone from Africa or Asia? We can't get inside their heads at this point. It's going to be a very, very fascinating process.
J.D. Vance was with him, C02, just this weekend, which is pretty extraordinary. J.D. Vance had a personal audience with the Pope just, I guess, maybe 12 hours or so before the Pope died, which is kind of amazing. There has been friction. There has been kind of issues between the Trump administration, or President Trump, and Pope Francis. This was another kind of a shocking moment, but turned out to be kind of awesome, in my opinion. C03, if you don't mind, C03.
A person who thinks only about building walls, wherever they may be located, and not building bridges, is not a Christian. This is not in the gospel.
So he kind of went out of his way to say that, and then Trump gave it right back to him. This is when he was running for president the first time. C04, please.
I didn't think it was a good thing for him to say, frankly, and he was talking about the border. And as you know, I'm very strong on border security, and we have to have a border in this country.
He actually said that maybe I'm not a good Christian or something. It's unbelievable, which is really not a nice thing to say.
I was surprised that the Pope would pick on President Trump, who was pretty clear at that point on pro-life. And in contrast, pretty cozy with Joe Biden, John.
Absolutely. And not just cozy with Joe Biden. Let's not forget the famous Sino-Vatican agreement between China and the Vatican, which basically Vatican and the Communist Chinese Party, mind you, which basically undersold the underground church in China, and Christians there are suffering tremendously because of that agreement. That's still in effect. That is product of the Francis pontificate. And going back to President Biden, you're absolutely right. He cozied up to him. He continued to allow him to receive Holy Communion despite his grave instances of standing for things like abortion. That's not right. We don't believe that as Catholic, right? So I think that the whole border issue, that's significant. If anything, Trump needs to follow what Pope Francis himself and the Vatican have done with their own immigration policy, which has the most strictest laws in the entire world. You cross those Vatican lines, you go to prison for 5 years. So if we can both mimic each other, we'll be in good shape.
John Yep, thank you very much. And Ken Chandler, thank you. John is at Catholics for Catholics, CFORC.com. Check him out. Ken, we'll see you at the office, and we'll be right back.